Hey, everybody, and let's try this again. My name is Jessica Dwyer, and I finally have a working microphone. And I see it working, which means you can hear me now, finally. I want to welcome you to my latest video here. Actually, got a little bit more light this time, so you can see some of the collectibles back there. And so tonight's discussion is going to be about two films that are extremely important. And if you caught our discussion about the Oscars, you'll have heard me speak about a movie called The Great Dictator. The Great Dictator was a film released in 1940 by Charlie Chaplin that very similarly used humor and drama as well, and beautifully mixed all of this together in a film that took on what was happening at the time in Germany and in the world with World War II. And it skewered Hitler. It skewered Adolf Hitler. It skewered the Nazis' threat, and was probably one of the most beautifully written speeches in the history of film in that movie. And so I wanted to discuss that film and Jojo Rabbit, which won Best Screenplay this year at the Oscars, and how those two films really utilize the power of comedy and the power of film to take on hate in a way that is beautiful and strong and powerful. And a lot of people, I don't think, unless they're Charlie Chaplin fans or they've seen the video of Hitler playing with a bouncing ball of the world, um, and know what the Great Dictator is. At least not more modern audiences or younger audiences. Myself, I was a massive Charlie Chaplin nut. I loved him from a young age, and when Robert Downey Jr. played him in the film of his life, I fell in love with him even more because, hey, it's Robert Downey Jr. being Charlie Chaplin. But The Great Dictator is really the film that it just really, if you've never seen it, will make you fall in love with Chaplin and the art and power that he had, and what he did with that movie. And the risk he took with it. It was a major risk, and it ended up working out for him. Later on, he would have a lot more issues and be blacklisted from Hollywood. But when The Great Dictator was made, Chaplin really took a chance, because not only was it really the first talking film he did, talkie, because his film Modern Times, he did have some speech in that, but it was a gibberish song. But with The Great Dictator, he proved that he had a voice, and it was a very strong and powerful voice. And he was definitely not a fan of war. He was not a fan of killing or fighting. He was a pacifist. And this film was a celebration of of goodness and kindness winning against hate and tyranny. And how he did it was just amazing. He directed it, he produced it, he wrote it, and he starred in it. He starred in two different roles. He played the little Jewish barber, who was sort of like the amalgamation of his tramp character, and he played Adenoid Hinkle, who was the horrible dictator who very much was Hitler. It was a fantasy country. It wasn't a real country based on there, and there was these fake names for all the characters, but you knew who they were. Garbage was Garbles and Goebbels, and you had a Mussolini, and it just was beautifully shot too, just beautiful film. And Paulette Goddard, who was, I believe they were broken up at this time, but who had been one of Chaplin's wives, came back and starred in this with him as the young Jewish girl who falls in love with the barber, and she's just stunning. But she's sort of the face of the ones that were really being destroyed at the time by Hitler and the Nazis. So the film is basically a farce in that Chaplin plays this little Jewish barber who comes back to the Jewish ghetto to work. And at this time, the country has been taken over by quote unquote Hinkle. And they both look alike. The Jewish barber and Hitler look a lot alike. And this comes from a lot of people, accusing Chaplin of, he was Jewish in real life. He was Jewish. And people were always making fun of the mustache, especially when Hitler came to power, how it looked like Chaplin's. Anyway, the little Jewish barber, by these series of coincidences and accidents, ends up becoming swapping places with Hinkle, and ends up becoming the dictator at the end. He's in power. He the dictator has taken over, and he gets up on stage to tell everyone his war ramblings, as Hitler would do. And Chaplin was the rebel of his days, and he's right. And so when he gets up on stage, he proceeds to give this speech that is absolutely stunning and beautiful. And if you go on YouTube, as I said before, you can hear and see the whole speech. And within, it's a broadcast across the country, and it's basically him calling to arms all the good men and all the soldiers to not fight for the old men in power and to sacrifice themselves for some other man's gain, but to stand up for the right and soul of humanity, of being good people, of taking, changing the world for the good, and there being light on the horizon. And it's absolutely, to this day, it rings true and will stir you to your soul if you listen to it. The film has some very comedic moments. Chaplin himself would not have made this movie at the time if he had known the true horror of what was going on in Nazi Germany. No one really knew the depths of evil that were happening. Yes, there was a war. Yes, people were dying, but no one knew the true depths of horror that was happening there. And Chaplin himself, years later, would say, "I would never have made the film if I had known exactly what was going on with the Jews and how this happened." It wasn't even going to be shown in the UK. They weren't going to do it because at the time they had an appeasement policy. The UK did, because they hadn't gotten deep into the war yet. They were still trying to play nice with Germany because they were so close to them and they didn't want to anger them. And but then the film was actually released after when it came out. It was actually after the UK became involved with World War II. So they showed it, and it was a hit over there because everyone hated the Nazis at that point, as you should. You should hate them. But it was interesting to see at first people were against this movie because, Hitler and all of his cronies had a hold on a lot of powerful people, and no one really took them seriously. And they had integrated into Hollywood, and there were, people would have people from the Nazi Party at parties and things like that because they thought it was amusing, or they knew that this was a growing popular trend in Germany, so they had them over. And Chaplin thought it was ridiculous and hated it, and it stood against everything that he was for. And so he started writing and putting together this movie, and it released, and it was a hit. It was a major hit, and it used not only it. I mean, it was a comedy, yes, but there are very serious undertones in this film, and the ending, especially, where you see the passion and and just, you know, joy as well on Paulette Goddard's face the as she realizes that the little barber has taken the place of the great dictator, and what he says to her, and that it's over, the war is over, that the hate didn't win. And it's just a powerful statement and a powerful film. And that kind of leads me to Jojo Rabbit, because um you know Jojo Rabbit was directed, produced, written, and starred Taika Waititi, who was also playing Hitler in it, and he is also Jewish. So the parallels are pretty great. Um, Now, the Jojo Rabbit is not an original work like The Great Dictator was, but it was a adaptation of a book called Caging Skies. And what I've read and seen is that Takika had been read this book as a kid by his mother, and he decided he was going to create this film based on it. Now, again, you have a film that takes dark subject matter and also takes and shows you the absurdity of it with the comedy. And it's beautifully shot, beautifully done, just touching, amazing performances by the people within it. And the parallels are really great. I would hazard that, you know, knowing the things I know about Taika Waititi, I'm pretty certain he's seen The Great Dictator. He probably was inspired a little bit by Chaplin there. But both films utilize this dark period, and they use comedy as a way of not only dealing with what's happening and what those times were, one taking place right in the middle of when these atrocities were happening, and the other years later. Yet here we are in a state in the world where in the UK you have extremists taking power, and you have the Brexit happening, which was motivated by people not wanting to help their fellow man, and all kinds of horrible things. And then you have what's happening here in the United States, and this film skewers that hatred and Nazism and nationalism and that kind of attitude is very timely to show something like this, a film that takes place in that time and shows the absurdity, but also the darkness that happens, but at the same time shows that you don't have to be a part of it, and you can fight against it, and you can win against it. And that's the message of both of these films. One that took place literally in the middle of World War II, that was being filmed as that was happening. And then you have Jojo Rabbit, that is set in that time, but it was created during a time where you have just very similar steps happening in our world, and especially in the United States. And it's interesting because he's from New Zealand, but he, I think, recognizes some of the things happening here. And it's, even though it sounds alarmist, it's still, no one thought that the funny little man with the funny mustache would get to where he got. And yet here you have children and people being segregated and put in cages for the color of their skin and where they came from and what they believe. You have, a country that's being torn apart by extremists and nationalism, and a guy who likes to yell and gesticulate and be pompous on stage, and likes to hear himself speak a lot, and has the ear of everyone, and we're covering up for him now. And it's very terrifying to see the parallels, and especially with The Great Dictator. What didn't you know, Zinni? I'm sorry, I just noticed you spoke up over there. And feel free, anybody that comes in, to talk on the chat. But you have, you know, Hitler and Adnoid Hinkle are, they knew how to play the media really well. So that's why when you see The Great Dictator and you see Jojo Rabbit is more focused on the people, they're, and the children. And then with the Great Dictator, it's more of a broad statement, and it really shows the absurdity of of all of it. And yet, even with the absurdity, it really happened, and it was, you know, it just it calls out the stupidity and lunacy of all of it. And you see the absurdity of this little man who had so much power, and then you see the little man who had no power, and yet when he gets it at the end, what he does with it, which is just to ask all the others around him to just help one another and care and see the goodness in humanity. And that's the message that that film was stating. And that's what with Jojo Rabbit is being said as well, is that all it takes is for you to see what's going on around you and not let it change you. Keep, you know, keep love alive within you when you see all this hate. As cliche as it sounds, that's really the message to take from both of the movies. And that's why I think they're both two really great representations of using the medium of film to convey a message about what's happening in the world, about history, and showing us what's going on right now and what we can still do, and what you should always do when you see something like that is, and what you can do to help, and how you shouldn't let it change you. Um, and that's the beauty of that. I love movies and the medium being used for that, and especially comedy. Comedy is very, very powerful. It's being laughter and finding something funny is just as much of a powerful emotion as love when it comes to anything. And it it opens you up to the what you're seeing. When something makes you laugh, it makes you care, and you are more attuned to it. You're paying more attention to it. Comedy is a brilliant doorway into learning things, and having things sneak into your brain, and making you think about them. And that's why, you know, Chaplin was a brilliant, brilliant creator, because he would take things like The Great Dictator, and he would take like Modern Times, which was a cautionary tale about letting the mechanisms and industrialization take away the humanity of the world with what was happening. He kind of was also using that as a sort of a cautionary tale about talkies a little bit, because his whole thing was using film and expression to convey his art. And he didn't need to talk to convey what he was feeling, because he could express it with just his face and his eyes and what he was doing on screen. But it was also a cautionary tale about man losing humanity to this industrialization that was going on at the time. That's his, industry taking away workers and their ability to make a living, because they wanted to put machines in there because machines were cheaper and that kind of a thing. That was part of it too. He just was a master of that. And that's why his work still resonates, and why people are talking about Charlie Chaplin to this day. Why, when I met Robert Downey Jr., he was all Iron Man'd out. He was all Tony Stark. But what did I say to him? Thank you for Chaplin, because that movie was amazing, and the actor that you portrayed was a legend. And he shook my hand, and I think it surprised him that at Comic-Con somebody would bring up Charlie Chaplin to him, and he said he still learns from that guy to this day, watching him work, and that's pretty amazing. And I truly believe it, because when you watch Iron Man, all those scenes where you just have this close up of Robert Downey Jr.'s face, he has to convey expression and in a make you believe that he's in this suit, but he's also, it's on his face. He's got to sell it. And that's part of the power of Chaplin. And I really truly think that and it's kind of the same with Taika Waititi. When you watch him with films that he's done, like JoJo Rabbit, Hunt for the Wilder People, and Boy, and what he did with, What We Do in the Shadows, especially that movie was amazing, just because it was like a crazy, insane horror comedy, absurdist movie. But in that film, there are scenes that will break your heart, specifically with his character, with when he's talking about his lost love, or when he's standing outside her house and she's like in her 80s and he's still young, and he's still pining for her, and it's that conveyance of emotion that both of them can do, and they do it in their writing, they do it in their filmmaking, and in these two films specifically, I think it shows the similarities between the two of them, and the power of comedy being used to talk about and fight against these, the power of hate. Laughter is a weapon against that. And that's why I think that these two movies will be a great double feature. If you want to, if you're listening, Alamo Drafthouse, pair these two together, show them on a big screen, and let it be a nice history lesson for people. I think it would be great. So that is what I wanted to share with you tonight. Watch both and see that you can, even it's not strengthening anything about the Nazis. It's not lightening what they are at all. It truly is a way to show the insanity and absurdity of it without, showing the absurdity of it, showing the insanity of it, but also showing the fact that within all of that, you can still have the power of standing up against it and winning. So with that, guys, thank you. I hope you enjoyed this. Check out Charlie Chaplin's work. Check it out on YouTube. You can just type in The Great Dictator Speech and watch that, and just let it blow you away with just how beautiful and angry and righteous it is, and just gorgeous. Thank you, guys. JoJo Rabbit comes out on DVD tomorrow, and I'm buying it. So thank you, and hope you enjoyed. I'll see you later. I'll be back soon with another video. Bye.